the new Kodak Gold 120 film stock from a professional photographer. What's it actually like?
Work hard, rest often.
All right, I don't know what type of young teacher vibe I got going on here, but I'm kind of into it. Now, I digress. Welcome back to the channel, or if you're new here, my name is Finn Badgley. I'm a commercial photographer and all-around content creator. And Kodak Gold 120, what do we think? Having used it as a professional photographer. Recently, I did a shoot with my Mamiya 645 where I used completely Kodak Gold 120 film. Now, because this was a very intense shoot, I also did use my digital camera kind of as a backup as well. This is what I usually use for my regular workflow. Now, for my main bulk of work, Portra 400, Portra 800 have been my go-tos, especially in the 120 format. Now, having come from that world, what does Kodak Gold 200 feel like? How does it stack up? And this is something where I'm still learning to kind of color this film. So it's a bit of a process because I know how to edit Portra 400 on 120 at this point, but Kodak Gold 200, it's a bit of a different process. I'm figuring it out. So keep that in mind. Now, even with that said, I'm really liking the results I'm getting from this. It's a bit of a punchy film and it's got some great saturation to it. I really like the tonal range. And the grain that you get from it, it's noticeable, but it's very fine being a 200 stock. Now, with that said, you want to shoot in brighter conditions. Because of that, you don't want to really go into low light at all, but that was fine for the purpose that I was using. You just want to shoot in a bit brighter light. Now, I was shooting in like broad daylight, where 200, I would be shooting at like 100 digitally, but I matched my settings so we get the same result across the board here. And I gotta say, the results out of this, I'm really liking. Like, all in all, it's a really clean stock. It's a little cooler toned than maybe what I would experience regularly from Portra 400, except it doesn't have that kind of green undertone that I find Portra 400 has a little bit. It has less of that. It has a bit of a warmth to it while still being cool, if that makes sense. And then a lot of these photos I hit with a Lightroom preset that I've created called Warm Glow. It makes everything, it punches it up a little bit. It creates a nice warm glow out of it. If you want access to these presets, let me know in the comments down below, as I use them on most of my photos when I'm editing them in Lightroom, and then I take them over to Photoshop and do a little extra tweakage. Now, the shots themselves, the stock has great dynamic range, as film just naturally does anyways. Like, the shadows and the highlights are all protected there. And I like to overexpose my film just a little bit, especially with color negative, because if I overexpose it, I can get that detail in the shadows and the highlights. Film is really good at retaining highlights, so I'm able to pull that back, versus digital, I do the opposite. Sometimes I'll underexpose a little bit to protect my highlights so they're not blown out, then I can raise the shadows, because that's generally how those things work. Now, even with that in mind, the highlight fall off, the skin tone retention, all of it is so great. It's actually pretty easy to color grade. You know, I find that I don't have to really pump up the saturation at all. It's really where I like it. Maybe I'll warm it up a little bit if that's kind of the vibe I'm going for. I like to have a lot of warmth in my photos too. So maybe for you, like a regular level of warmth is what you'll get out of Kodak Gold. But for me, I like to just punch it up a little bit, which is where that preset Warm Glow comes in, because it just adds that extra little sizzle to the photos that really just warm them up, make them give it that summery feel, which I really like. And even like these ones here, you can see how it creates a bit of a moodier effect, but the highlights are there, and even though she's backlit, it just holds all that detail really well. Maybe in something like this, the greens I might darken down a little bit just to have them brought down just a touch, but I also like the saturation that you're able to get out of this. And for comparison, I'm gonna do the Lightroom edit, which isn't necessarily the full retouched Photoshop image as well. We'll do the Lightroom edit, which is mainly just a preset, and then the original scanned negative as well. So you have the two to go off of to see the difference there. Because here's the thing, I can show you an edit of what I've done to the film and you can be like, oh, that looks so great, but what does the film look like itself? So that's why you'll see a lot of the unedited scans here, so that way you can get an idea of what Kodak Gold 200 on 120 actually looks like. With that in mind, as you're seeing all of these come up, like, personally, I loved working with this and I love seeing the results and I loved color grading it. But for you, what do you think? Would you use Kodak Gold 200? Because here's the thing, I think I can edit Portra 400 and Kodak Gold. Like, there are different scenarios where I'd use different ones for sure, but I think both of them have a space in my workflow. And I think especially for these outdoor sunny shoots, I think Kodak Gold 200 definitely has a place in my work, in my film workflow. I think it's not replacing Portra at all. I think it's a nice accompaniment beside it, used for different purposes. So that's really my thoughts in total on Kodak Gold 200. Let me know if you've used this film stock and if you're looking into trying it yourself. I hope this was helpful for you. All of these were taken on the Mamiya 645 Pro TL with the 55mm lens. That is a 35mm equivalent. I just love that focal length because it's similar to the focal length that I'm on right now for this video, where you can get a little closer but you get enough background in there. I just really love that for portraits and stuff like that, because if you go too wide, if you go too close, you might start getting some distortion in the face. But if you keep it far enough away, it still keeps things natural. Unlike like a 24mm or a 28mm, it still gives you enough context there, which I love for commercial photography, for portraits, for fashion, all of it. And I hope this video has been helpful to you, especially if you've been looking at shooting Kodak Gold 200 on 120 but haven't made that leap yet. I hope this helps you decide that, because I would definitely use this again. But let me know if you've used it and what your experience has been like. Thank you so much for watching. Subscribe if you like this kind of thing and want to see more different film videos from me in the future. Work hard, rest often, and as always, my friends, I will see you on the next one.